My mom said I was overreacting about my new stepfather, then I found the box he hid behind the water heater. When my mom told me she was dadding again, I wanted to be happy for her, I really did. My dad had been gone for 3 years at that point, gone in the permanent sense, not the ran-off sense, and the house had been stuck in this weird limbo ever since. Like we were all waiting for something to reset, but nothing ever did. My mom was functional, cheerful in public, and quietly hollow in private. I learned to stop asking, "How are you?" because it never led anywhere. So when she said, "I met someone," I smiled and said, "That's great," and meant it. She showed me pictures on her phone. His name was Greg, tall, friendly looking, the kind of guy who smiled with his whole face. He had a dog, he liked hiking. He worked in property management, which sounded adult and stable. He wore button-down shirts even in casual photos, which my mom called classy. The first time I met him was a Sunday dinner at our place. He showed up with a store-bought pie and the kind of confidence that makes you feel like you're already on familiar terms, even if you've never spoken before. He shook my hand and held eye contact just a little longer than necessary. "Good to finally meet you," he said. "Your mom talks about you all the time." My mom blushed like a teenager, which was both sweet and unsettling. Greg played the part perfectly, complimented the food, offered to help clean up, asked me questions about work that felt thoughtful but not intrusive, told a couple of stories that made my mom laugh so hard she wiped tears from her eyes. I remember thinking, okay, this is fine, maybe this is good. The only part that felt off, barely off, not even worth mentioning, was how he watched the house. Not in a paranoid way, more like inventory. His eyes moved around rooms as if he was noticing things most people didn't. He commented on the age of the windows, asked about the roof, mentioned that the gutters looked like they needed to be cleaned out soon. At the time, I assumed it was just his job. Property management, right? That kind of person sees houses the way mechanics see cars. After dinner, while my mom packed him leftovers, he asked me casually, "So you still live here full time?" I nodded, "Yeah, for now." He smiled, "It's good you're around, helps your mom." It sounded like a compliment. But something about the wording made my shoulders tighten, not enough to react, just enough to remember. Over the next few months, Greg was around constantly, not in an overbearing way, just present. He'd stop by to drop something off or help with something. He fixed a leaky faucet, replaced a light fixture, patched a crack in the kitchen wall. It was hard to dislike someone who came into your life and started making things easier. My mom glowed around him. She started wearing lipstick again, started playing music in the kitchen while she cooked, started talking about future plans like they were real things, not fantasies meant to fill silence. Then one night she told me he was moving in. She said it carefully, like she expected resistance. "It just makes sense," she said. "He's basically here all the time anyway, and he makes me feel safe." I nodded. I didn't argue. I told myself that if she felt safe, that mattered more than whatever vague discomfort I couldn't explain. Greg moved in with the efficiency of someone who's done it before. Within a week, his things had blended into the house like they'd always been there. His shoes lined up neatly by the door. His toiletries appeared in the bathroom. His coffee mug sat in the cabinet beside ours. He installed a new lock on the back door just for extra security. "Too many weird things these days," he said, patting the lock like it was a pet. "Better safe than sorry." It was a normal sentence. But again, the vibe was possessive. Not protective. Possessive. I tried to dismiss it. I tried to be fair. I told myself I was being sensitive because the house still felt like my dad was in the walls, in the dust, in the quiet places, and any new presence felt like an intrusion no matter who it was. Still, little moments started stacking up. Greg began making decisions without asking. He rearranged the garage, moved tools around, donated old junk from the basement that my mom didn't even remember owning. He started talking about updates and improvements like he had a long-term plan. One day, I came home and noticed the framed photo of my dad in the living room wasn't on the shelf where it had always been. I found it on the side table in the hallway, half hidden behind a lamp. I picked it up and put it back. The next day it was moved again. I brought it up gently to my mom while Greg was out. "Hey, did you move Dad's photo?" She frowned. "No, why?" I explained. She sighed like I'd mentioned something trivial. Maybe Greg did while he was dusting, you know he likes to tidy. Tidy, I repeated, by moving Dad's picture out of the living room. She gave me a look that said, "Don't do this." "Please," she said, "don't start. He's not trying to erase anything, he's just making the house feel less sad." Less sad. That phrase hit wrong, like sadness was clutter to be cleaned up. I nodded anyway because my mom looked tired and I didn't want to be another problem she had to manage. A few weeks later, I noticed Greg had started locking certain doors. Not the main doors, inside doors. The basement door specifically. It wasn't always locked, just sometimes, and when it was, Greg always had an explanation. "Just organizing down there," he'd say. "Paint fumes," he'd say. "Some stuff fell, don't want anyone tripping." The basement had always been a messy storage space. Old boxes, holiday decorations, my dad's tools, random furniture we never got rid of. We didn't go down there often, but it was never restricted. Now it felt like a place I needed permission to access. One day I went down to grab a box of winter clothes and found the door locked. I jiggled the handle once, then paused, annoyed. Greg heard it from the kitchen and called out, "Hey, don't go down there today." "Why?" I asked. He appeared in the hallway, smiling like he was amused by my impatience. "Because I've got some stuff laid out, it's a mess." "I just need one box," I said. He held out his hand. "Tell me what you need, I'll get it." That made my stomach twist. "I can get it," I said. He kept smiling. "I know, I'm offering." It was such a small exchange, but the air in the hallway felt tight after it, like I'd bumped into an invisible boundary he didn't want crossed. That night I told myself I was being dramatic. A guy moves in, wants to organize a basement, big deal. Maybe my mom asked him to handle it. Maybe she didn't want to deal with it herself. But then I started noticing how often Greg handled things. He started picking up my mom's prescriptions from the pharmacy. He handled her mail before she saw it. He offered to take over paying certain bills to make her life easier. My mom loved it. She called him thoughtful, supportive, a blessing. And maybe he was. Except every helpful act seemed to remove one more thing from my mom's direct control. The first time I tried to talk to her about it, she got defensive immediately. "You don't like him," she said flatly. "That's not what I said," I replied. "I'm just noticing." "You're looking for problems," she interrupted, "because you don't want anyone else here." I felt my throat tighten. "That's not true." She shook her head, eyes glossy. "I have spent 3 years grieving. I get to have something good. Please don't take that from me." So I stopped bringing it up. Which, looking back, is exactly what Greg counted on. Because once I stopped speaking up, he got bolder. He started calling the house ours. He started referring to me as still figuring things out. He started making little comments about how, eventually, I'd want my own place. Not rude, not direct. Just planting the idea. Then one evening, I came home to find a real estate flyer on the kitchen counter. "Thinking of selling, we make it easy." I looked at it confused. My mom had never talked about selling, never even hinted at it. Greg walked in behind me, saw the flyer in my hand, and smiled like I'd found a funny joke. "Oh yeah," he said casually, "just something I grabbed. Market's hot right now, always good to know your options." "Are you thinking about selling?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. He shrugged. "Not today, but maybe someday. This house is a lot of work and your mom deserves a fresh start." Fresh start. Again with that language, like the past was a stain. When my mom came in, I asked her about the flyer. She laughed awkwardly. "Greg just likes to plan." "Plan what?" I asked. Her smile faded. "Don't do this." And that's when I felt it clearly for the first time. My mom wasn't just in love. She was being managed. The thing that finally pushed me over the edge happened on a random Tuesday morning. I was home because I had taken the day off. Greg and my mom both left early. The house felt strangely quiet without him, like the walls relaxed. I decided to go into the basement. Not to snoop, not to prove anything. Just to remind myself that it was still my family's house too. The basement door was locked. But this time, Greg had left the key in the kitchen drawer. I found it easily, like he'd forgotten or like he'd wanted me to find it. I stood at the basement door with the key in my hand for a long time. Then I unlocked it. The air that came up from the basement smelled different than it used to, not just damp and dusty. There was something sharper underneath, like cleaning chemicals or metal. I went down slowly, step by step, the old wooden stairs creaking under my feet. Most of the basement looked the same, boxes stacked, shelves lined with clutter, a workbench along the wall. But the far corner near the water heater looked newly organized. Too organized. There were fresh plastic bins, a tarp folded neatly, and behind the water heater, half hidden in the shadow, was a cardboard box sealed with new tape. A plain box. No label. But my name was written on the side in black marker. I stared at it, my throat going dry. Because I knew in my bones that I hadn't put it there. I didn't touch the box right away. I just stood there in the basement, staring at my name like it might rearrange itself into something harmless if I waited long enough. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my neck. The basement suddenly felt smaller, the ceiling lower, the air heavier. I checked the rest of the space first, forcing myself to move to stay rational. I walked past the shelves, glanced into the open bins, took in the workbench. Everything else looked normal, too normal. Clean in places it hadn't been before, dust wiped away in neat lines, tools arranged by size instead of the chaotic piles my dad used to keep. That detail hit me harder than the box. My dad's basement had never been neat. I went back to the box. It was taped shut with clear packing tape wrapped twice around the top. New tape, the kind that squeaks slightly when you press on it. I crouched down and ran my finger over my name, written carefully, not rushed, Greg's handwriting. I'd seen it enough times on sticky notes around the house. I told myself it could be something stupid. Old clothes, childhood stuff my mom wanted to give me later, something Greg had organized and labeled in advance. But then a darker thought crept in. Why hide it behind the water heater? I cut the tape with my keys. Inside the box were folders. Not papers loosely thrown in, folders stacked neatly, each one labeled. My name appeared again on the first tab. Under it were documents I recognized instantly. My birth certificate. A photocopy of my driver's license. Old school records. Medical paperwork. My hands started shaking. I hadn't put these here. I knew exactly where most of these documents were supposed to be, or at least where they had been: a locked drawer in my room, a file cabinet my mom barely touched. Somehow all of it had ended up here. I flipped through the folders faster now, panic overriding caution. There were printed emails, screenshots, notes typed out in a clean, methodical font. Subject lines jumped out at me. Next steps. Transition plan. Contingencies. I didn't read everything at once, my brain couldn't handle it. I pulled out one document and scanned it. It was a list. My name at the top. Bullet points underneath. Employment status, unstable. Living arrangement, dependent. Emotional history, unresolved grief. Timeline for independence, 6-12 month. I felt like I was going to throw up. There were notes about me that weren't just observations, they were judgments, framed like assessments, like someone evaluating an asset or a problem. Another page mentioned the house. Property transfer considerations. Resistance expected from adult child. Documentation required. Documentation required. My stomach dropped. This wasn't organization. This was planning. I heard a sound upstairs and froze. For a split second I was convinced Greg had come back early. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stood there, trapped between the box and the stairs. Then I realized it was just the washing machine kicking on. I forced myself to breathe and kept going. At the bottom of the box, under all the folders, was a smaller envelope, manila, unmarked. Inside were printed emails between Greg and someone else, an email address I didn't recognize. The tone was professional, detached. Once the house is sold, the remaining occupant should be encouraged to relocate voluntarily. If cooperation is not achieved, alternate legal options can be explored. I stopped reading. I didn't need to see more. This wasn't about helping my mom move on. This was about removing me. Quietly, legally, methodically. I shoved everything back into the box exactly the way I'd found it, retaped it as carefully as I could, and put it back behind the water heater. My hands were slick with sweat. I wiped them on my jeans and climbed the stairs, locking the basement door behind me. The house felt different now. Hostile in a way that's hard to describe. Like I'd discovered a secret passage in a place I thought I knew, and now nothing felt solid anymore. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the real estate flyer still sitting there, mocking me. I thought about all the little comments Greg had made, about me figuring things out, about my mom deserving a fresh start, about planning ahead. I realized something that made my chest tighten. Greg hadn't just moved into our house. He'd been studying it. Studying us. When my mom came home that evening, I tried to act normal. I helped with dinner. I smiled when Greg talked. I listened to him describe some maintenance issue he wanted to fix over the weekend. Every word sounded rehearsed now. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You seem quiet today." I forced a shrug, just tired. He nodded slowly, watching my face. "You should really think about what you want next. It's good to be proactive." The way he said proactive sent a chill through me. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with him, every moment I'd ignored or dismissed. I realized how carefully he'd positioned himself between me and my mom, how gently he'd made himself indispensable. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't confront him directly. Not yet. Because someone who keeps a box like that isn't the kind of person who panics when confronted. He plans. And I was already part of his plan. I spent the next few days pretending nothing had changed, which turned out to be one of the hardest things I've ever done. Every conversation felt like a performance. Every smile felt forced. I watched Greg the way you watch someone when you realize they're capable of more than they let on, not with fear exactly, more with a sharpened awareness. I noticed how often he checked his phone, how he positioned himself physically between my mom and difficult conversations, how he redirected topics the moment I was mentioned for too long. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I needed proof, not just for myself but for my mom, because I knew if I came to her with feelings or suspicions, she'd shut down immediately. She'd already made it clear she didn't want to hear anything that threatened the version of happiness she'd built with him. So I started documenting. I photographed the real estate flyer. I screenshotted text messages where Greg talked about timelines and next steps for the house. I took notes every time he made a comment about me moving out, becoming independent, or finding my own path. He never said anything outright. That was the point. A week later, I came home to find my bedroom door open. That alone wouldn't have meant anything, except I always closed it. Always, and my desk drawer was slightly ajar. I checked it. The folder where I kept my passport and other important documents was gone. I didn't panic, not outwardly. I went through the motions of checking the rest of my room as if I were just disorganized. Then I checked my mom's room, the hallway closet, the kitchen drawers. Nothing. At dinner that night, I mentioned it casually. "Hey," I said, "have either of you seen my passport folder? I can't find it." My mom shook her head immediately. "No." Greg didn't answer right away. He took a sip of water first. "Yeah," he said calmly, "I moved it." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "You moved it?" I asked. He said, "It was in an unsecured drawer. Important documents like that should be kept somewhere safer." "Where did you put it?" I asked. "In the filing cabinet in the basement," he said, "with the rest of the important stuff." The way he said the rest made my stomach drop. "That's my stuff," I said carefully. "I didn't ask you to move it." Greg smiled, but there was something thin behind it. "I was just helping, you'll thank me later." I looked at my mom, expecting her to say something, anything. She didn't. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep and went back into the basement. This time I didn't hesitate. The filing cabinet was new, metal, locked. I stared at it for a long time, my hands clenched at my sides. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. He wasn't just planning to push me out. He was consolidating control. The next morning, I called a friend and asked if I could stay with her for a few days. I didn't explain everything, just said I needed space. She said yes immediately. Before I left, I did one more thing. I went into the kitchen and took photos of the key rack by the door. There were more keys on it than there used to be. Keys I didn't recognize. I packed a bag quietly and left while Greg was at work and my mom was out running errands. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a scene. I just left a note for my mom saying I was staying with a friend for a bit and would call later. That night I called her. She sounded confused, then hurt. "Why didn't you tell me you were leaving?" she asked. "Because I needed you to listen," I said, "not react." She sighed. "This is about Greg, isn't it?" "Yes," I said, "and I need you to hear me out before you defend him." There was a long pause. Then she said quietly, "Okay." So I told her everything. The box. The documents. The plans. The missing passport. The locked cabinet. I didn't exaggerate, I didn't accuse, I just described. When I finished, she didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she said, "He said you were having a hard time, that you felt threatened by change." My chest tightened. "Mom, did he show you anything?" She hesitated. "He showed me notes about helping you transition, about making sure you didn't get stuck." I closed my eyes. "That box," I said, "wasn't help, it was a removal plan." Her voice cracked. "He said he was protecting both of us." "No," I said softly, "he was deciding for us." The next day, my mom went into the basement while Greg was at work. She called me an hour later crying. "He never told me," she said, "about any of this." 2 days after that, Greg came home to change locks. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten. He smiled tight and controlled and said, "You're making a mistake." My mom didn't argue. She just said, "Get your things." The house felt different after he left, not lighter immediately, just quieter, like something tense had finally unclenched. "The box is gone now, burned actually," my mom insisted. Sometimes I still think about how close I came to being quietly erased from my own life. How easy it would have been for his plan to work if I hadn't opened that box, if I'd kept telling myself I was overreacting. The scariest part isn't that Greg did what he did. It's how reasonable it all sounded, right up until it didn't. And how easily help can turn into control if no one's paying attention.